Hello, Scorpio. If you found yourself in patterns where others take and take while you're left, wondering how you ended up feeling used, guilty, or emotionally drained, this message is for you. Because no matter how strong or intuitive you are, there's one quiet trait that can still make you vulnerable to manipulation, especially by those who know how to read emotional energy like a predator reads fear. And I say this with love, not blame, because I know how deeply you care. I know how fiercely you love. But that same devotion, if unchecked, it can become a silent doorway for those who don't deserve your loyalty. Let's name it for what it is: people-pleasing. It doesn't sound like a dangerous thing. In fact, most of your life, you may have been praised for it being the one who always shows up, always says yes, always smooths things over. But Scorpio, people-pleasing is not the same as being kind. True kindness comes from strength. People-pleasing, on the other hand, comes from fear, the fear of conflict, the fear of being rejected, the fear that if you stop giving, you'll stop being loved. And here's where it gets dangerous. Narcissistic or emotionally exploitative people can sense this in you instantly. They don't need to push or pressure. You'll do it all for them. You'll say yes when you want to say no. You'll carry their emotions on your back, make excuses for their cruelty, and shrink your truth to avoid setting them off. You'll think you're keeping peace. But what you're really doing is handing them the strings to your heart, and they will pull at them until you forget what it feels like to move freely. But Scorpio, here's the truth I need you to hear today. It is not your job to manage anyone's emotions but your own. You were not born to make others comfortable at the expense of your soul. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your no. You are not too much for having boundaries. You are not selfish for protecting your energy. And you are not cold for walking away from those who punish your honesty. The real you, the Scorpio beneath the armor, is not here to be agreeable. You are here to be real, to speak truth, even when it shakes the room, to stand alone, if necessary, rather than betray your own soul. And yes, that will disappoint people who only loved your compliance, but their disappointment is not your problem to fix. So today, I'm inviting you to come back to your own center, not the mask you wear to avoid confrontation, not the role you play to stay needed, but your actual truth, the one that knows what you feel, what you need, and what you will no longer tolerate. You are allowed to say no without guilt. You are allowed to be misunderstood without chasing approval. You are allowed to set boundaries and still be a loving, radiant soul. When you stop people-pleasing, something sacred happens. The narcissist loses their grip. The manipulator loses their script. And you, Scorpio, you come home to your power, not a power that dominates, but one that quietly refuses to be diminished. Not a power that seeks revenge, but one that no longer makes excuses for mistreatment. Let this be the chapter where you unhook yourself from the need to please. You don't owe peace to those who profit from your silence. You owe yourself the freedom to live as you truly are: bold, deep, and unapologetically whole. And perhaps, Scorpio, the most telling signs of this pattern are the ones that feel the most familiar. So familiar, in fact, that you may not even realize they were never yours to carry. You feel guilty when you say no, not just uncomfortable guilty, as if declining a request is a personal failure, a betrayal, a sign that you've let someone down or aren't doing enough. Even when your body is tired, your energy is spent, and your soul is whispering, rest. You override your own limits because the idea of disappointing someone else feels heavier than the weight of self-neglect. You give up your time, your energy, sometimes your sanity, not because you want to, but because you believe you have to. You change your opinions just to keep the peace. You nod. You smile. You laugh along even when your heart doesn't agree. You stay quiet in conversations where your truth is gasping for air. Not because you lack conviction, but because you've been conditioned to believe that disharmony is dangerous, that being liked is safer than being honest. And so you edit yourself, you dilute your fire. If you silence your inner knowing, just to avoid the ripple of tension, but in doing so, you betray the deepest part of yourself, the part that came here to speak, not to perform. You take on responsibilities that were never yours. Someone else's anger, their chaos, their wounds, they show up on your doorstep, and suddenly, without even realizing it, you're the one holding all the pieces. You become the fixer, the listener, the emotional caretaker. Even when it drains you, you tell yourself it's empathy. You tell yourself it's love. But underneath it all is a fear that if you don't step in, you'll be seen as selfish, cold, or unkind. And yet, all the while, your own needs go unmet. Your own pain goes unspoken. You apologize, even when you haven't done anything wrong. I'm sorry becomes a reflex, used not as a sign of accountability, but as a shield, a way to smooth things over before they escalate. Someone's upset, and without even knowing why, you're the one taking responsibility. You say sorry for existing, for asking, for needing, for drawing a line, and with every unnecessary apology, you chip away at your own sense of worth, your own right to take up space. But perhaps the deepest wound of all is this: you fear disappointing others more than you fear abandoning yourself. You stay in situations that hurt you because you don't want to be the bad guy. You keep quiet about what you truly feel because you're afraid of being misunderstood or rejected. You shrink, you soften, you twist your boundaries into something more palatable, all in the name of being enough for others, while becoming less and less enough for yourself. Scorpio, this is the heart of people-pleasing, not kindness, not generosity, not love, but a learned survival pattern that taught you your voice was dangerous. Your needs were too much, and your presence had to be earned through self-sacrifice. And I want you to know, with every fiber of my being, you don't have to live like this anymore. You don't have to keep trading your truth for temporary peace. The people who are meant for you will never need you to disappear in order to stay. And this, Scorpio, is where the most painful truth emerges, because once you begin to see the pattern, you also begin to see just how long it's been happening and how effortlessly certain people have stepped into roles in your life that were never meant to hold that much power. The reason narcissists and manipulators are so successful in gaining control over people like you isn't because you're naive or foolish or weak. In fact, it's often the opposite. You are deep, emotionally attuned, and perceptive, but you are also wired for connection, for repair, for devotion. And those qualities, when paired with unhealed patterns of people-pleasing, they become a silent broadcast to the wrong kind of person. Narcissists are master readers of energy. They don't need words. They don't need explanations. All they need is a few moments in your presence to detect where your soft spots lie, where your boundaries are too flexible, where your fear of rejection outweighs your need for respect, where your sense of self-worth still depends on how others perceive you. They sense it quickly, sometimes in seconds. The subtle hesitations in your voice, the way your body tightens when they frown, the look in your eyes that says, "I hope I didn't upset you." And once they find that thread, they begin to pull, not with force, not at first, but with charm, with guilt, with unspoken expectations. They create a dynamic where your value becomes tied to their approval. And because you fear causing discomfort, you slowly begin to silence yourself. You start to make excuses for their behavior, rationalize their mood swings, absorb their blame, all because the idea of disappointing them feels unbearable. They don't need to demand compliance. You offer it willingly, hoping that if you just love harder, to try more, fix everything, they'll finally give you the peace you crave. But that peace never comes because for them, it's never about connection, it's about control. They are drawn to those who bend, who absorb, who twist themselves into emotional shapes just to avoid conflict. And the more you give, the more they take, the more silent you become, the louder their expectations grow, until one day, you don't even recognize yourself anymore, not because they took your power, but because you handed it to them slowly, one unspoken boundary at a time. Scorpio, you must know this. What they call love is not love. What they call loyalty is not mutual. What they demand is not connection, it is submission. And the only way to end the pattern is to stop feeding it, to become so anchored in your own worth, is so unapologetic in your truth, that even the most skilled manipulator can no longer find a single opening to crawl through. You are not here to be a puppet. You are not here to please at the expense of your soul. You are here to rise, to remember, and to reclaim every part of yourself that was once handed away in the name of peace. And the moment you begin doing that, Scorpio, the moment you choose discomfort over betrayal of self, that is the moment the narcissist loses all power over you. So what now? Scorpio, now that you see it, this pattern, this wound, this deep and quiet habit of self-abandonment masked as kindness, what do you do with it? You don't just break a pattern like this by force. You unravel it gently, truthfully, and consistently, like peeling back layers of armor you didn't even realize you'd been wearing. And it begins not with battle, but with clarity. The first step is this: shift the way you see yourself, shift the way you define goodness. Being a good person does not mean being a silent one. It does not mean sacrificing your truth for harmony or proving your love by tolerating mistreatment. Somewhere along the way, someone may have made you believe that love is proven through endurance, through bending, through disappearing a little bit at a time. But that's not love. Scorpio, that's survival. And it's time to stop calling it anything else. You are allowed to be kind and still have limits. You are allowed to walk in compassion without becoming a landing place for chaos. Your heart is sacred, not a doormat. Next, I need you to stop apologizing for being who you are. Every unnecessary "I'm sorry" chips away at your authority over your own life. You're not sorry for saying no. You're not sorry for having needs. You're not sorry for being unavailable to emotional manipulation. From this point forward, let your no be a full sentence. Let your boundary speak without explanation. Let your voice tremble if it must, but let it be heard. Because every time you speak clearly, you are teaching your nervous system that you are safe in your truth. You are reprogramming your body to know that being disliked does not mean being unsafe. That conflict does not mean collapse. That protecting yourself is not cruelty. It is self-respect in action. And finally, Scorpio, this is where your soul reclaims itself. Set your boundaries and hold them without guilt. Not because you want to punish anyone, but because you are no longer willing to punish yourself. There will be pushback. Of course, those who once fed off your compliance will feel your silence like a betrayal. But that discomfort is not a sign you are wrong. It is a sign that your energy is no longer available for misuse. Do not over-explain. Do not defend. Do not shrink just to make someone else more comfortable. A simple "that doesn't work for me" is more than enough. Your worth is not up for negotiation, and neither is your peace. In the beginning, this will feel unnatural. You will want to soften. You will want to explain. You will feel guilty, even when you've done nothing wrong. That's okay. Guilt is not proof that you failed. It's just evidence that you're breaking an old contract with your past self. And the more you choose truth over guilt, the more your spirit will rise. You were never meant to live at the mercy of others' comfort. You were never meant to be loved for how little space you take up. You were meant to be whole. You were meant to be free. And Scorpio, now is the time to remember that, not just once, Not just when it's convenient, but every single time someone asks you to trade your truth for their approval. This is how the pattern ends. This is how you come home to yourself. Real goodness, Scorpio, does not come from obedience. It does not come from pleasing others, from saying yes when your soul is whispering no, or from staying silent just to keep the peace. True goodness, the kind that heals, that liberates, that nourishes both you and those around you, comes from truth. It comes from alignment. It comes from choosing what is honest over what is convenient. Even when it costs you approval, even when it threatens the illusion of harmony, you were not born to be agreeable. You were born to be authentic. And there is a vast difference between being good and being compliant. One requires courage. The other requires erasure. One strengthens your soul. The other hollows it out piece by piece. Living righteously, Scorpio, it doesn't mean making sure everyone else is happy. It means living in integrity with your own spirit. It means honoring your boundaries, even when others don't understand. It means speaking what's real, even when it shakes the ground. It means standing firm in your values, even when the world asks you to bend. So let this be your return, not to the version of you who kept peace through silence, but to the version who trusts her inner voice enough to make waves when necessary. Because peace built on suppression isn't peace, it's control. And your heart, your truth, your presence, they were never meant to be managed. They were meant to be seen, to be respected, to be free. So if you've made it here with me, Scorpio, I want you to take a deep breath, not the kind that just fills your lungs, but the kind that reminds your soul, I am allowed to choose myself. I know it's not easy to unravel years of being the one who bends, the one who fixes, the one who makes room for everyone else while quietly disappearing from your own life. But you don't have to live like that anymore. You don't have to trade your truth for approval. You don't have to sacrifice your peace just to avoid being misunderstood. You were never too much. You were simply taught to shrink. And now you're remembering how to rise. I'm Selena. And I want you to know, this isn't just about breaking patterns. It's about coming home to who you were before the world asked you to be small. You are not here to please. You are here to live wide open, to speak truth, to set fire to what no longer serves, to be so grounded in your worth that no manipulator, no guilt, no silence can shake it. And I promise you this, the moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment the universe begins to align with your power. That's not a loss. That's your liberation. I'll see you in the next message. Until then, walk in your truth. And don't apologize for your light.